Right, so as we're all becoming more and more aware of the events in Gaza, especially in Rafah right now at the hands of the IDF, one of the most concerning aspects is the lack of aid, the lack of food, and the continued defunding of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, and the consequences of that for the people trapped with nowhere to go and little food, water and medical supplies getting in, partly as a result of settlers blockading attempts to get it through, celebrating in the fact that the people in Gaza are starving. Of course, people fled their homes as the IDF advanced, running for their lives, leaving their belongings behind, including food. So the IDF have, whilst making their way through the Gaza Strip, in homes they haven't razed to the ground yet at any rate, been cooking up a storm using the food of people who now have none, enriching their own rations and performing for the Israeli media whilst they do it. Right, so Israel really is being exposed as a very sick, heavily propagandised society if the equivalent of a Mary Berry Sunday newspaper pullout, except for being presented by members of the Israeli Defence Force instead, is what passes for newsworthiness and entertainment. A lifestyle cooking feature published in the liberal-leaning Haaretz newspaper, their Hebrew-only version, it must be said, Google Translate once again being my friend, coming to the fore, featuring members of the IDF, humanising them as they steal the food of the people who formerly occupied said housing. It's absolutely disgusting. Yet here the soldiers pose for the camera, a glossy little puff piece for the Israeli masses. It's like can't cook, won't cook. Remember that on the telly? Except instead of turning up with a mystery bag of ingredients to baffle a celebrity chef, it is the people blowing hospitals up and shooting kids, raiding the cupboards of people that have been driven away, that are doing the cooking with whatever they can find. Finding a lot more than the people who fled that home can now find themselves, should those particular people still be lucky enough to be alive. It is literally in the food section of this edition of Haaretz. It really is a culinary lifestyle piece. It is a sick, sick premise. I'm stunned. Even more so when you consider Haaretz have been quite vocal in their opposition to Netanyahu and what he has been doing. It makes you wonder what other narrative differences there are between the Hebrew and English version of their publication. The article features a couple of IDF soldiers called Nadav and Ilam, both 37. One's a lawyer, the other's a PE teacher, and it is rancid. The soldiers talking about how they scrounge around in the abandoned properties, pilfering whatever they can find to add to their own food, and then glorifying it, saying how much it gives them a break from the fighting and how good it is for their mental health. Gives them a break. Their mental health. Ah, the poor dears. Genocide is such hungry work and takes such a toll, I'm sure. Not half as much as it is on those you're fighting, because let's face it, the vast majority of them can't find back, can they? You absolute psychopaths. So shall we see what they've been cooking up then? There's plenty of pictures after all. Here's the title picture. Look, captioned, in every home in Gaza we found olives, olive oil and lots of spices. We are cooking with mixed emotions. This one is particularly sickening, calling this dish bruschetta alla Gaza. Cooking in war conditions. We decided to turn the food into a place of sanity for us. I wouldn't personally go on about your sanity when the entire world is questioning it. This one could have come straight out of a cookery book. Cooking with killers and thieves, but captioned, to eat well and in organised, planned way whilst around there's a storm raging. Yeah, and you aren't on the receiving end of the storm. Here's another cookery book level photographic setup. Rice and curry, the furthest from India. But then it goes from bad to worse as further photos chase the sympathy vote for what these soldiers are going through. War meal. We understood that it is possible to fight and take part in campaigns and yet eat well, and this became the story of our unit. Yeah, thieving food from the abandoned cupboards of Gazan people, that's the story of your unit. When we sat and ate, people smiled and forgot about the distress for a moment. Sure, except the people facing being bombed in Rafah right now night after night with nowhere else to go because they can't possibly escape from there. What about their distress? This is the worst you can imagine. For as much as Haaretz have called the actions of the Israeli government into question, you have to appreciate that this is the Israeli equivalent of The Guardian here. And liberals just have the most horrendous track record of othering things that should never be othered. If you're calling out Netanyahu, then you shouldn't be glorifying the soldiers carrying out his orders, doing his bidding, carrying out the genocide we're watching unfold every single bloody day. You certainly shouldn't be humanising people in an army that is repeatedly committing war crimes. This is the worst you can imagine, is it? Well, let me make a suggestion to you then for your next culinary puff piece, that you might go to Rafah and ask the people whose food these IDF soldiers are tucking into what gourmet delights they can look forward to. What would the response be, though? Sorry, I had a bowl of rice last Tuesday. You should have been here for that. I don't know when I'm going to eat next. Oh, and by the way, can you tell those settlers outside the gates to shift their tents before we all starve to death? Can you also ask them while you're there to stop dancing and celebrating as we die of starvation too, please? At least let us get some sleep. Honestly, it's obscene. I've read some god-awful journalism in my time, but trying to gloss over genocide like this with a food article just had bile rising in my throat. It's just on a whole other level. An army marches on its stomach. That's the saying, isn't it? But the IDF are saying the quality of the food really boosts morale too. Well, I don't doubt it. The smell of death and destruction in the air after a hard day's genociding must really bring out the flavour. Haaretz went on, though. Haaretz asks about their feelings eating in Gazans' houses, knowing they had to flee. Yes, there is mixed feelings for sure, because I'm using their tools in their house. But on the other hand, we have to eat. Our instincts and our wish to eat supersedes this. It's important to clarify that these are abandoned houses, some of which are destroyed or are planned to be destroyed. And this is how we fight in Gaza. Oh, so the food is just going to go to waste then if the occupant's home is destined for destruction. I can only assume since you sat around there eating happily there are no Hamas operatives there then. In which case, why are you destroying the housing? Well, we can't very well move in and redevelop Gaza otherwise, I suppose is the answer. Though nobody's saying that out loud, are they? Housing has been destroyed just as much as hospitals, schools and other infrastructure has been. Almost 70% of housing in Gaza has been damaged or destroyed, so there is no intention of ever allowing people back to their homes, because their homes would need to still be standing, not slated for destruction, and that's based on the most recent estimates I've been able to source, which are dated to last December. It's almost certainly got to be higher now because the IDF have moved so much further south in Gaza. 22% of agricultural land has also been destroyed, making inhabiting Gaza, being able to live there and survive and support yourself, even more so than before, has become unsustainable. It would be remiss of me to not note that whilst the IDF are tucking into the food they find in abandoned houses, food warehouses in northern Gaza have been destroyed at the same time. I suppose that food there was just too accessible to people still in the refugee camps like Jabalia in the north. Not everyone, after all, fled south, just most of the population. But you need to make sure they can't eat either, I suppose. As this article went to press, the head of the World Food Programme announced that children are actually now dying of starvation in Gaza. We already knew that most people were eating less than once a day. With UNRWA being defunded and set to collapse still by the end of this month, with people dying of starvation, kids dying of starvation already, just imagine how much worse it's going to get once UNRWA does go under. And all because Western nations, again, take Israel at their word on UNRWA being infiltrated by Hamas, without any of the evidence having been shown. Alongside that, as part of measures to placate Genocide Joe, Benjamin Netanyahu promised shipments of flour would be allowed into Gaza. But in a sign that he isn't really in charge anymore, his far-right nut job of a finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, blocked those shipments. What's Netanyahu done about that? Absolutely jack, of course. It's so bad there that people are resorting to even trying to eat grass. The sad thing is, Haaretz, as far as challenging Israel and holding power to account out there goes, has been one of the best Israel have on offer. Yet when they do pieces like this, you have to be reminded that being the best of a bad bunch is not a high bar. And how Palestinians are dehumanized as a matter of routine across Israeli discourse. It's a sick society. It's an apartheid society led by even more sick leaders. I am revolted by this story. I'm reminded that we cannot ever stop paying attention to the situation in Gaza, and that we have to hold Israel and all those supporting the regime doing stuff like this out there in what they are doing to account. As we know, South Africa are one such nation doing just that, having taken Israel to The Hague, now planning on doing likewise with the US and the UK. But they have also petitioned the ICJ here and now for an emergency order specific to Rafah to get aid in and keep Israel out. A story which you can get all the details of here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.